When we walk through the quiet, spotlit cases of a modern museum, we tend to view ancient artifacts through a very specific lens, as harmless, beautiful relics of human craftsmanship. To the rulers who originally commissioned them, these objects were calculated psychological weapons used to enforce strict compliance from their subjects. As design historian Dr. Annette Muberman points out, design speaks, and when it is paid for by the state, it speaks propaganda. Absolute rulers across history have all faced the same problem. Maintaining authority with military force is expensive and incredibly fragile. But by conquering the mind, authority ceases to look like a threat and begins to look like a law of nature. We are tracing the lineage of these visual strategies, starting with the methods used to manufacture the very first state myths. At Luxor Temple, the Egyptian state utilized overwhelming physical scale to dwarf the individual. These colossal, seated statues were built to instill an immediate, visceral sense of insignificance. This propaganda invaded private spaces as well. This ancient wooden bed frame shows how the ruler's absolute power was stamped onto domestic, everyday items. Tutankhamun's decorated chest provides a specific map of this strategy. The imagery isolates the pharaoh in his chariot, towering over a chaotic battlefield to frame him as the sole architect of cosmic order. Explicit, violent iconography threatened dissenters. Here, the ruler is depicted as a black sphinx, physically crushing and trampling his enemies into the ground. That extreme violence sits alongside the godlike serenity presented on official state furniture. The backrest of this throne shows a calm, idealized scene, while the heavy lion heads project an aura of total, divine control. The Egyptian model relied on literal, inescapable physical depictions of dominance to prove that the pharaoh's status as a living god was an undisputed reality. By the time we reach Renaissance Florence, the strategy shifted. At the Palazzo Medici Riccardi, commercial wealth had begun to replace divine bloodlines. Because the Medici were bankers rather than born royalty, they required a more intellectualized form of propaganda. Step inside this room, and you are surrounded by Benozzo Gozzoli's fresco, The Adoration of the Magi. At first glance, it appears to be a standard, pious depiction of a biblical story. Look closely at the figures riding through this opulent procession. The biblical kings are actually painted portraits of the Medici family. By placing themselves at the head of this massive entourage, they validated their modern economic power by weaving it into a wholly ancient journey. This specific detail shows the young heir, Lorenzo the Magnificent, inserted into the role of a holy king. The family used the fresco to place their modern political faces into eternal history. The Medici strategy was to occupy the sacred. They painted themselves into the Bible to make their political rise appear as a divine fulfillment. Under Duke Cosimo I, this strategy escalated. Medici propaganda moved past religious association and toward explicit mythological deification. Humanist thinkers designed a clever linguistic metaphor for the Duke. They rebranded his name Cosimo into Cosmos, aligning his rule with the structural universe. Artists like Vasari combined this mythology with imagery in the antique style to officially rebrand the Duke as the god Apollo. This intellectualized Renaissance propaganda achieved the same goal as the Egyptian monuments. It framed a human ruler's authority as part of the natural order. The aesthetics shifted from gold masks to oil paint, but the psychological goal remained constant: to make power look legitimate. This is visible in physical evidence, like these elongated skulls. Elites have used design and body modification to visually separate themselves from commoners. Both the physical distortions of the ancient world and the intellectual metaphors of the Renaissance built a bridge between human vulnerability and perceived divine authority. Art and design in the service of authority are never neutral. They are physical manifestations of political intent. When you encounter grand design today, look beyond the aesthetics to identify who paid for the design and what they intend for you to believe.